and welcome to episode 4 of Ed Talk. Today we go over Battle of the Bay results where I got first with Ruby Amethyst, and we'll also go over some of the gameplay and other deck lists from this tournament. So I brought Ruby Amethyst because I think this is like my comfort pick deck, and I thought there was a couple interesting cards in the new set that I wanted to try out, specifically Genie Wish Fulfilled and the Maui Half Shark. I think everything else is pretty standard in this deck. I know some people are trying the new Diablo one cost and trying to combo it with Crab, but the reason why I didn't want to play it specifically was that its zero attack was not that great on the draw, and it wasn't able to kind of interact with my opponents like Cursed Merfolks or they're like Lilo, Maleficent, those type of cards, and especially like in the mirrors where you need to kind of contest your opponent's Chernobogs and Magic Brooms. I didn't think it did a really good job doing that. I know some people also want to cut Flynn Rider to add the Diablo, but I feel like Flynn Rider is such a powerful play on turn 2 on the play that I'm okay kind of having a weaker card on the draw sometimes. And even on the draw sometimes, like, it'll still trigger and, like, it's still a decent. Like, I know some people are like, oh, 2-2 is such a bad body, but it still kind of contests, like, most of the cards on that kind of slot. But I know a lot of people are running Calhoun. It doesn't contest that, but I think other than that, I think it still does a pretty good job. So yeah, a lot of people are playing the new Genie. I think the new Genie is very powerful, especially on the play, in combination with Elsa. Because if you get to play Genie and your opponent plays Genie, if you play Elsa and tap down their Genie and you're able to challenge their Genie with your Genie and Elsa, you'll basically like blow out your opponent and win the game. So I thought that was very interesting, and I didn't know the kind of magnitude of that until I actually played it. And I think because of that play, I probably would go up to 4 Genie, just because of that interaction. The other card I kind of wanted to try was the Maui Half Shark. Specifically, I wanted to try it with Elsa. I thought that the interaction of being able to tap down one of your opponent's characters and challenging with Maui was better than like playing Maui in Red Blue, for example, where you kind of had to wait for your opponent to kind of exert their characters before you can get the card back from your discard pile. The reason why I added Dragonfire was for Maui Half Shark to be able to try to retrieve it back, and reuse it. And I think that card is actually fine. Like, I think in certain metagames that there's a lot of cards like Maui Half Shark running around. I would definitely want some copies of Dragonfire to be able to deal with them. And it still deals with cards like Diablo and Beast. So I think it's still worth maybe running 1 or 2 copies. I know some people like don't like the card, but I think it's actually fine, and I think it's very reasonable to still like run 1 or 2 copies. I think Sisu is the other card that people were kind of looking at in this deck list, and I think I was very high on this card in Texas because there were so many kind of Emerald and Amber style decks, and I think those decks are actually making a comeback in set 6 from what I've kind of noticed in the first couple iterations of the new set. And I think also inadvertently, the Sisu is also very good at dealing with Genie and Rabbit, especially like, turn 8. A lot of people like to do the Genie plus Genie or Rabbit Rabbit or Genie plus Rabbit. And I think Sisu is really good to kind of take the tempo back in that spot. So I think this deck was pretty reasonable. The reason why I have like a bunch of just, two of copies of different cards are that, in a set like a week 1 or week 2 kind of a metagame, it's pretty wide open. And I still think it's pretty wide open right now. So I kind of wanted to have some game into all the matchups. And as the meta gets a little bit more defined, I would say that I would try to kind of up some counts of certain cards and then also decrease some counts of certain cards. So looking at the other top decks, I know Charles, I played him in the finals, and he was also running Ruby Amethyst. And I think this is basically the list that Kendall's running in the Continentals. And I remember I was talking to him kind of before he submitted his list, and he was kind of running like a Cusco Crab kind of half shark version of the list. But I was still a huge believer of like Flynn Sisu, and he was like, okay, yeah, like it's probably still very strong right now. So it still makes a lot of sense to play that combo. And I think he also really liked playing, between 4 to 6 1 drops and castles in his deck. And you can see that it's very apparent that he, did that here. And I think the reason why I don't like Castle in particular right now is that every Amethyst deck basically has, you know, many copies of Crab, Fox, and all the Ruby decks also run Maui. So there's actually quite a bit of ways to deal with locations, and it's kind of like a high variance play, right? Like if you guess wrong that your opponent doesn't have those cards and they actually do have those cards when you play locations, you can get kind of blown out of the game. And I really just didn't like that. I did play that in like a previous format, like at Texas. I did run the four castles, but I think the kind of location hate has kind of picked up in numbers in this current meta. So I kind of don't like the locations. But other than that, everything else is pretty standard. No big Sisu in this, but definitely the four Be Prepared is always, pretty solid into all the decks in the metagame. So in third, I played Daniel T in the semis, and I think there's actually quite a bit of uptick in Amethyst Steel as well. Um, I think the appeal of it is that everyone also sees this new genie, and it's like, what's the best kind of pairing with this card? And I think Amethyst Steel does make sense in that you have the Amethyst for drawing cards, and then you have the Steel for the removal. So what I really like about this deck is that there's a lot of cards that are really good on the draw. Stuff like Crab, like Shift Robin Hood, Fire the Cannons, Twin Fire, even this kind of hidden Shift Tinkerbell play, really good on the draw. And something that kind of caught me off guard when I played him was that and then along came Zeus was able to kind of remove my genie, right? So if he plays genie, I play genie. He could sing his genie to remove my genie with then along came Zeus and kind of just tempo me out of the game. So yeah, I really do like this deck on the draw, and he did beat me when he was on the draw once. So I think this deck actually has some legs actually, and is able to kind of deal with a lot of the meta decks right now because I think Fire the Cannons is very strong. A lot of people are playing the Curse Merfolk, Banzai, and even Diablos that are like not in Cove, right? So I really like the Fire the Cannons, and it's a really good kind of mid-range deck to deal with the aggressive strategies. So in fourth, this is a guy that I think Charles beat. This is like a little bit more kind of low to the ground kind of version of Amethyst Steel. I like that, you have a lot of one drops, right? So you basically never miss your one, and you're always able to either go like one into two one drops and or one into two and then like three one drops. So I like how low to the ground it is. Still has like the Fire of the Cannons, it has the Befuddle. So this is another deck that has a lot of legs, especially like on the draw. Because historically speaking, aggro has a problem kind of winning on the draw, right? So I think what this deck list is trying to do is set up a Crab or set up like a Befuddle or Fire the Cannons on the draw to kind of be able to take the game back when you're on the draw. So I mean, he made top four, so it works for him, right? So we got, who else do we have? We have an Amber Steel in the top eight, and I think this is basically where a lot of the Amber Steel decks I think are going. This is kind of similar to what I would consider like Boomy Steel, like Boomy Jr. He kind of or Scott. He kind of popularized this version of Amber Steel that doesn't run a whole new world, but instead runs like a lot of like aggro strategies in terms of like you want to go like Daisy into like Smee, Lawrence, and then you just up a Pluto, and that's like very, very, very hard to beat, especially when you're on the play. An interesting tech here I see is the Seven Dwarf Mines, and actually I said that before that locations were kind of hard or kind of easy to deal with, but I think this location in particular is somewhat hard to deal with, especially if you're able to kind of deploy early and get some immediate value off of it. Because you can move the Happy or the Dock in this particular deck list to do 2 damage, and being able to do it over and over is pretty powerful. And the addition of Lilo in this deck also makes it so you have a lot more juice than you would have before, being able to recur every turn. So I kind of like where this version of Amber Steel is in the metagame, and I would expect a lot of Amber Steels to kind of move towards this direction. So Batsu, I did play him in Swiss, and I think right now Emerald Steel is kind of in a weird position, I would say. I would say in particular, the Genie made Emerald Steel a little bit more awkward because it's so easy to, not super easy, but there's definitely like an additional roadblock to Diablo because of it. So I think Emerald Steel will probably have to evolve in some form to kind of deal with this new Genie. And I think the addition of Basil, I think it might work in like a kind of one of to try to catch your opponent off guard. I actually didn't really get a chance to see that card being played, so we'll see if that kind of ends up being in the metagame. I think what helped me in particular against this deck list was when I played the big Sisu, because usually there's not a lot of answers to kind of Prince John and the Muses except for Be Prepared. And I think the big Sisu actually does a ton of work in this matchup, just being able to kind of clean up all these smaller characters without being removed by Ursula Deceiver. But I think overall, I think Emerald Steel will probably still be around, but I think there will probably be some modifications to kind of adapt to this new Genie gameplay. So I think the other popular deck list, green purple, has been making a lot of waves, as some people even consider this kind of like the best deck of the format. I think with this with this deck in particular, what is appealing is like the Cursed Merfolk into Banzai opener, and then it just has a ton of kind of tempo plays, especially with like Kid Cloud Kicker, and it also utilizes the new Genie. And I think the addition of Gogo Tamago made this deck a lot scarier, because usually you would try to go for the value trades, but if you do that and you have like too many, damage on your characters, you might end up, just taking a ton of damage from the Gogo. So I think this deck is pretty scary, especially when it's on the play. It can definitely tempo you out and, just get a lot of lore really quickly. So the last, I played How in the quarters, and I think this is kind of the other variation of Amber Steel. Just being able to still have that whole new world with the aerial play is still very powerful, and you can still do the same thing as the Boomy Steel version, where you go Daisy into Smee, Lawrence, Pluto. Like that setup is still very powerful and very hard to deal with, and I like that the aerial is able to kind of consistently find the songs. So I think it's you can go one way or the other. I think there's some merit in playing Whole New World, especially if people are playing really greedy decks and just trying to draw a bunch of cards instead of playing to the board. So I think in those type of metas, a Whole New World definitely makes a lot more sense. And if you're able to kind of rip your opponent's hand and they can't do anything, you'll probably win the game off of that. So I think those are the top 8 deck lists, and I guess we can start going into some of the gameplay. So this was the round 2 of the tournament that I played. And I'll fast forward a little bit. So basically it's Red Blue by Kevin, and I was playing the Ruby Amethyst. So in this particular, I didn't know what he was playing, and I don't know if he knew what I was playing, but mulligan wise, you probably still look for the similar kind of things, right? When you're playing Red Blue, looking for that ramp into like a Grandma or Hiram. So I mulliganed 5. I think he also mulliganed quite a bit of cards. I think 5 or 6 as well. So we'll see kind of where it goes from here. So I think one thing that people notice that what I do, especially if I'm on the draw, is that I kind of don't look at my hand until my opponent finishes. And in the official rules, that's what you're supposed to do anyway. So he opens Popsicle, pretty like standard opener. And I have a Broom and a Chernobog. And I know that in this particular matchup, I think my hand was also like not that many Inkables, so I kind of wanted to play this Chernobog, even if he has Tipo, in case I would need to kind of get rid of my Chernobogs immediately. So I ink a Maui. Maui's not that important in this matchup, so I kind of ink it. And I think I don't have the Flynn, so I definitely go for the snake play, which is like, it's reasonable. Like it still contests a lot of the early cards that Red Blue has. So he opens Tipo into double sail. So he's basically at 6 ink and he played an ice block. But I realized in a lot of the newer versions of Red Blue, it's very scary that, you basically go down to like 0 cards, right? So like I think he actually ended up passing his turn here because like you kind of just run out of juice really quickly if you ink your whole hand so fast. And if you don't have, the Hiram to refill, you're kind of in trouble. So I opened, pretty decent like snake into Sisu rabbit. It's like one of the more ideal openers that I could have here. So I'm pretty happy about that. So here he gets the 7, right? So, scary cards, B prep or like Scar type cards are very scary. And he plays the human Sisu. So, he got his hand really low and was able to kind of pop my Sisu off of that. But I noticed that, he only had 1 card in hand and, I was like just kind of hanging out, just waiting for him to kind of do something for me to react, right? So I'm just trying to, build as many resources as I can and just kind of deal with what he has as we go. So from here, I think he has a brawl. Yep. But it's like, the problem with these type of cards is like 1 for 1, but you don't really get to kind of develop to the board. Whereas basically all my cards are like developing in some way, either drawing cards or removing threats and leaving a body behind. So I think that's pretty like strong. And he played a dime here. He was kind of like behind lore wise, so honestly, I wasn't really that afraid of this dime. I knew I was eventually just be able to kind of grind him out. So I decided to go wide here because I saw that last turn he didn't really have B prep. It was kind of a check in a way to see if he had it, and it didn't seem like he had it here. So I was, not really afraid of going wide. So, every turn I'm trying to inch my position, drawing as many cards as possible, and just, try to get that lore count up. So he ripped a Scar here, and I was like, whoa, like he's about to clear my whole board basically. So yeah, he used Ice Block, and he just started, going to town using Popsicle on the Scar. And I really do like Scar in this kind of meta right now. Um, you can kind of catch people off guard with it, especially if they play Pete and they don't expect like this Scar to try to just like pop off, right? So I think it's a good meta call. You get additional B preps basically. So I'm basically just drawing as many cards as I can here, and waiting for that time where I could just start, spamming goats until I win the game. So I think I'm at like 15 here or something like that. And I think he's at 1 or 2. Kind of hard to tell. I think since this was kind of like the first game of the day, they were trying to get their setup ready. So yeah, he used Lucky Dime on this Scar, and I think he wants to maybe sing the B prep in this spot. Or that's what I would be kind of thinking about, yeah. I guess that's the same as kind of questing and playing B prep. So from here, I think the main thing you want to do is just, keep drawing cards and filter through until, you can play the double goats and win the game off of that. So he has another B prep, which is like fine, I'm just going to keep drawing cards. It's not a big deal. So yeah, in this spot, I just go extra wide, try to end the game. Don't need any more ink at this point, so I think just being able to turn sideways with these 3 is already very strong. I think get to 18, I have a goat bounce. Yep, so that'll end the game. So, I mean, this game in particular, I think what happened was like Kevin just wasn't able to really have a lot of pressure in the early game. And I was kind of just able to run away with it because, he didn't try to fight back, and I was just able to kind of quest through. So yeah, we shuffle up, go to the next game. So yeah, we're trying to fast forward this. All right, we'll see if we can skip to the gameplay. So I think, yeah, they missed some of this, but basically I opened Chernobog Flynn, and that's like the nuts, right? I was able to open Chernobog Flynn Sisu, and I think this game really showcases why Flynn is so powerful, because if your opponent basically misses, they'll just basically lose the game immediately, right? So he was able to get Sail, but he was unfortunately not able to get Ramp on 2 in this particular game. So he's trying to make up for it by, playing the Sail on 3 and Sail again to try to catch up to the turns where he can play like B Prep or Scar. But I think by this point it's already kind of too late. Like I think I was thinking about playing like a goat here, and just kind of sleeling it, right? Like I'll kind of look at his ink, and he only can go to 6 ink, right? So the worst thing he can do here is like play Medusa, but if that's the worst thing you do, then I think I still win the game. So I think at this point I'm already at like 10 or something, like something ridiculous, 14, something like that. So I mean, when I saw him play this hero, I was like, oh, okay, I guess I win this one, right? Because I think all I had to really do was turn sideways, and the game was over. So what did we learn in this game? I think sometimes like just having that curve out, like 1 2 3 4 curve out, like your opponent really just can't do anything about that, and you have to kind of respect it and play cards in your deck to kind of respond to these type of openers. So the next game, I played against Charles here.
Just wonderful.
And finals, the upside of being the top seed is that you get to go first, and I think going first in the mirror is like very very powerful. So like I was feeling pretty confident in this matchup, and I also saw that he only had the 6 1-drops, and I knew that this was kind of gonna be a part of this matchup, because if he misses his ones, which spoiler, like he did miss both of his ones in this game, like I was gonna get really really far ahead, and you kind of can see that he was kind of punished for this. So since I'm first, I'm gonna take a look first. I think I kept Sisu, which is one of the nut openers in this game. Like if you're on the play and you're able to open that when a 1 cost Flynn Sisu, and now it's like Genie, like you'll basically win the game. And especially if they Genie and you have Elsa, I think that's probably one of the best openers you can have. So I ink Shark, play the Chernobog. Shark, late game is kind of where it shines, but right now it's definitely the ink here. So he misses one, and when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, I basically already win the game. Like he's gonna have a really really tough time trying to catch up. So in this dynamic, he played Flynn, and that Flynn will basically never trigger, especially if I have the Sisu. Like I can just kind of leave it up. I think something to note here is that usually in this matchup, you always need to keep track of how many cards your opponent has. And if my opponent opened a 1-drop, then I would definitely not pop this Chernobog, because then, his Sisu would be bigger than mine, right? But because he didn't have a 1-drop, I had the luxury of being able to play this Chernobog and still get my 3 lore from this Flynn. So usually if you don't need the card, I would definitely just leave the Chernobog there. But if you do need it, then obviously you have to pop it, right? So here I opened pretty well, Chernobog, Flynn, Sisu, Rabbit. And like his Sisu will basically always be behind. And it's kind of the onus on him to try to remove my Flynn from this spot. So he plays a Genie here. It's a little bit scary because, I don't have a Genie to kind of contest his. So I think the best thing I could do is like, play Brawl on this Genie, right? But because we both drew a card on turn 4, my Sisu is still going to be bigger than his, and I'm going to gain that 3 lore. So on this spot, I'm kind of thinking about like, how do I keep my Sisu larger than his? And, I think one thing that, in the mirror that's very important is if you only have 1 copy of Rabbit, you kind of need to protect it. So I was kind of looking at my hand, and I definitely had an Elsa and a Fox, and I was considering like, okay, if I just Elsa his Flynn and challenge it, is that a good spot, right? And I realized that I need to keep this rabbit in my hand in order to kind of reuse it for later. So I decided to just bounce it back. So from here, I think he will go for the Elsa play because now he can kind of freely, challenge my Flynn and kind of take control of the board back. And if you really look at this spot, like it's kind of looking good for Charles, right? Like he was able to kind of kill my Flynn, and I'm not really able to deal with that. But fortunately for me, I have I have this big Sisu, and I remember Spessy was going crazy, so I just played along with him. And this Sisu was actually it like banished 3 things, right? So this is actually really strong. So I really like Big Sisu in this matchup because most of the guys are actually 2 attack or less, and it'll put in a lot of work. So yeah, of course he had to kind of challenge my Sisu, but at this point I'm kind of just running away with the game. Like I'm already at 12 lore, and I'm just drawing a ton of cards, and eventually I'm kind of just inching my way to the goat turns. So from his side, like I can see his hand, he just has like a ton of B preps, right? And usually B prep is like pretty strong, but I think at this point of the metagame, it's gotten a little bit weaker because of Genie. Like if you're just B prepping Genies all day, your opponent will just keep refilling, right? So I think in this particular matchup it's not that powerful, but it definitely got him out of like this spot. So I was like kind of aware that he could just B prep me for the rest of the game. So I had to play in a way where I can't really commit too much, but I needed to kind of commit enough where he had to play B prep. So one of the things I really like about Magic Broom and like Chernobog late game is that you can kind of just play them out and kind of cycle them through for a lore and just like draw a card. But obviously it's not good against like the Diablo is definitely better in this spot if you had it versus this B prep, but Diablo is just kind of weaker earlier game, right? So here I'm just playing 2 characters at a time. Just I'm not really in a rush, and I just need to get to the point where he just runs out of cards to kind of remove my cards. So this Genie is pretty huge. I think I like ripped it off the top, and if he doesn't like deal with this board, he already played like 3 copies of B prep, right? So if he doesn't deal with this board, then I'm gonna win. So he's gonna Tremaine I decided to pick Flynn because I can quest for 2 with this Genie, and I can also replay it, right? And this board is actually quite annoying, especially if I'm already at 19 and he needs to deal with both. And since there's only 1 copy of B prep left, he's in a pretty tough spot. So I take game 1 there, and I think it was mostly off of the big Sisu on turn 6, just being able to kind of remove like 3 characters and swinging the tempo, questing for 3, and making him kind of respond to that. So moving on to the next game, I'm kind of just in this spot, I'm kind of just watching him, seeing how many cards he's gonna mulligan. And it seems like he's going for 4, and then I kind of check my hand, and I keep a Sisu here because I think Sisu is very strong on the draw. Just having that kind of 4 health body is kind of huge. So I ship 6 back. I'm trying to get that 1 drop into 2 drop into Sisu play. And I think even Flynn on the draw is not that bad in the mirror, especially if they're not able to open it. So in this game, he also doesn't open a 1 drop again, and he made a funny comment. He was like, "Thanks, Kendall, no 1 drop again." But yeah, so I'm able to open the 1 again, so that's like pretty fortunate for me. And because of that reason, you can see here that his Flynn will basically never trigger against the Sisu that I have. So it comes back to why did I keep the Sisu is for this spot in particular. So we'll have the same amount of cards in hand, and he won't get the lore from this. So kind of my game plan here is I'm going to try to leave this Broom as long as possible, because it's kind of the only reason that his Sisu is the same size as mine. So here, I think he decided that he's just gonna go for like another Sisu just to try to get that, lower pressure. And I think, did he ink a goat here before? I would have if that was a goat, I would have considered playing the goat here, but I think he kind of valued that, he wants that big body early game for Sisu, and I guess I don't really blame him for that. So I think this turn was the turn that I took the longest, probably of the whole tournament, because this Flynn is gonna be able to get this 3 lore at this point if I decide to play like a genie. So I just thought, well, if I'm gonna let him trigger the Flynn, I might as well just try to dig for more cards, right? If I play genie anyway and he gets to trigger the Flynn. Because alternatively, I could have played like a fox, try to challenge this Sisu, but I think for me, I was okay kind of giving him some lore this turn, just so I can kind of dig for more answers. So it's okay sometimes to give your opponent some lore, if you're able to catch up in a future turn. And something of note here is that if I'm the first one that's able to get Genie on the board first, if he plays a Genie this turn and I have an Elsa, that is also kind of another huge blowout turn that I can have. So unfortunately for him, I can see that, he didn't play turn 4 Genie or Rabbit, and he even just inked here and passed. So I saw that he kind of ran out of juice, and I think that's like another downside of only running like 4 copies of Rabbit and 2 copies of Genie. Like I know I ran 3 and 3, and in the future I'm probably gonna go up on that number because of these type of situations. Like if you miss your 4 cost draw card on 4, it's gonna be very rough to try to keep up with your opponent's card draw. So here I just played Maui because he didn't really do anything. So this Maui is just gonna block this Flynn in perpetuity. And especially if I have an Elsa, then I can kind of start challenging his board with this Maui as well. So here I think he's kind of considering like, what he's going to ink to play this Medusa. So he inked an Elsa to Medusa my Flynn, because yeah, this Flynn Maui combination is very strong, and it'll definitely run away with the game. So another upside of this Maui is it can sing friends freely, and you don't really have to worry about it too much. So here I have like a Medusa myself, and I'm able to deal with his Flynn. So I mean, all things considered, like for me being on the draw, I'm like pretty happy about this position. Like he didn't really run away with Flynn Sisu, and I'm able to kind of control the board well. So here Medusa's my Genie. It's pretty good to kind of keep the evasive threats kind of under control. So here I have a pretty good turn to kind of take the board back. I already noticed that, my Maui can run over the Medusa and still survive, and my, Medusa can challenge the Sisu, and I could just deploy like a Tremaine, right, to, take control of the board. So I think that's kind of the name of the game in this matchup, just being able to control the board and kind of force your opponents to play like suboptimally against it. And I think one of the backbreaking combinations in this deck is just using like a Maui to challenge something with 4 strength, because Ruby Amethyst doesn't really have any easy way to deal 1 damage. So I see another friends here, really good. Saw my Rabbit, and like I'm just gonna start going to town, right, drawing as many cards as possible. The reason why I kind of hard casted this friends is that I didn't really want to commit any more to the board, because then I'll just eat the be prepared, right? I mean, he doesn't have it here, but he could very easily have it, and there was really no reason for me to kind of overextend myself. So I mean, he has Maui here, so it makes a lot of sense for him to use his Maui to challenge my Tremaine, because like I said earlier, like it's very hard to deal 1 or 2 damage, and this Maui is definitely going to get at least kind of two values worth of cards But fortunately for me, like I have this Maui to kind of just eat his Maui. So I cycle through the rabbit fox thing. Like as anybody knows, like I just love drawing a bunch of cards, right? And I think no matter what, if you draw cards, you're gonna be able to find the solutions that you need. So I think it's always correct to just cycle through as many cards as possible to give yourself as many options as you can. So in this spot, if I was him, I would actually try to have saved this fox for either goat or for rabbit. I think using it on Chernobyls is probably incorrect just because it doesn't provide any extra value. So yeah, I ripped like basically all my friends here, draw some more cards, cycle through more cards, and I think at this point I have like 10 cards in hand, something ridiculous, right? And I remember Spessy was like, yeah, we're gonna need another hand for this hand. So I mean, at this point in the game, I'm just like slowly inching my way towards the goat bounce, and like these meta mims and merlins also present just a ton of lore threat, right? Just like even on this board, I didn't really commit anything if you really think about it. Like these foxes were bouncing rabbits, so they basically drew cards, right? Like meta mim basically turned into a draw two cards, and you still gain like lore from just questing with them. So that's why I kind of like playing Ruby Amethyst. Like you don't really have to commit anything to the board, and you can just get a ton of free questing power from these cards. So from here, I think he's just also just trying to control the board as best as he could. And for me, I think I have like 10 ink here. So I think another kind of important threshold for Ruby Amethyst is the 6+4 kind of play. Like being able to play like a lady and like a rabbit or a genie is very, very strong. So I think that's basically what I do here. I play the genie plus Medusa and then trade in my fox for his goat. So I basically take control of the board again, and I'm presenting this kind of 3 lore threat. So he's like cycling through his cards. And it was very smart for him to kind of bounce the rabbit back instead of playing another rabbit or genie, or else you can get blown out by the big Sisu. But fortunately for me, I drew a Tremaine here. So I just wanted to kind of play this like small ball game, just being able to control the board without committing too much to get be prepared. So here I think he does go for the 4+4, which is pretty common once you get to like this much ink. And since he has like multiple copies of Genie and Rabbit, I think he's okay kind of committing these cards and not being too upset if they get blown up. And usually this would be a really good spot, but fortunately for me, I just had the big Sisu to kind of clean up the board. And this is basically like a forced B prep position. And even if he B preps me, I think I already have lethal in my hand. Just being able to bounce the goat a couple times from 14, I think is already enough to win the game. But if you don't, so I think what's really funny was that I thought he was gonna play castle, so I had that Maui and Fox queued up, but he decided to play Genie instead. But because of the Genie, I can just go back to my kind of game plan of bouncing goats and setting up lethal. So in this spot, yeah, I already won the game because I have a B prep and a goat in hand. And even if he does nothing, I can just, play the goat, B prep, and win the game. So that was the finals. Closing thoughts about the deck. I think for the future, depending on what the meta kind of looks like, I still like Dragonfire if, Maui Sharks are around. And I think it's one of the cleanest answers to that card. But if that card isn't really around, I'm okay kind of shaving it for like more ladies or more B preps. And I think I'm definitely going to be up to 4 Genie now because of the Genie Elsa interaction. And I can also potentially shave down on the half shark to play more copies of Maui Hero to All if there's a lot of steel in the meta, because I think Maui is basically one of the best kind of answers to steel in general. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with the deck list, and let me know if you give it a try and how it does for you. Until next time, see you.